So what sets us apart with our founding compared to, France and these other nations? What makes us so culturally different historically?
What makes us culturally, well, obviously our isolationist, and I would credit the Protestant Reformation and the movement of Protestants to the United States. That therefore we're based on a product of religious freedom and stuff like that. But another one of the main things was just, like I was mentioning, the 7 Years' War and the East India Trading Company and stuff like that. And because of the 7 Years' War, Britain's in a lot of debt, so they tax us a whole lot. That's another huge thing, was the taxes. But I would say what sets us apart was the religious freedom specifically, and what we're focusing on today, and the more historical, environmental, like taxing and all of the cultural stuff. But
do you have any input on the story of the Boston Tea Party?
Boston Tea Party, it was just a revolt of tax on tea. That's mainly the gist. We blame the Indians for it, which was not great on our part. But it was that was the main thing where we were like, okay, we can take physical action against this, because we tried offering the olive branch petition as kind of like a final straw. We're like trying to do all this, like trying to. We tried really hard to avoid war with Great Britain because we knew how much it would suck for us.
They were the most powerful army at the time.
Most powerful army, biggest empire to ever exist, and it's
the
best trained.
Main naval country too.
Yes.
Would Spain be the only other one, really? Spain and Portugal?
Portugal is very, very small, not very powerful. They had a lot of merchant power, particularly in India, but the Dutch and the Brits had the best naval power. Spain,
Dutch, really?
The Dutch and the Brits the Dutch had their own India Trading Company. So
they kind of collaborated.
The Dutch and the British, they fought a lot.
Oh.
They fought a lot because Britain wanted dominance of the Indian Sea and the Dutch wanted the dominance of the Indian Sea, because they want, what's in India? Textiles.
That's
you have
cotton.
like textiles, and so basically like clothing, like stuff to make clothing and stuff like that, tapestries and stuff like that. So, but mainly cotton. They loved their cotton. So the Dutch really wanted in on that as well. So the Brits and the Dutch fought a lot on that. And plus then you have easy access to China. So, and China at this point is kind of shut down. They're kind of stopping. They don't engage in the Industrial Revolution. They don't engage in exploration. That's why Mexico isn't owned by China. We're letting a lot of land owned by China in the United States, which is another topic. But but Britain is just this giant world superpower that the world had never seen before. And so we're just kind of like, can you please let us alone? And King George was like, no
taxation without representation.
Yes.
So I was fascinated because recently I listened to Glenn Beck's show. Absolutely inspired man. So he was talking recently, and I never knew this until then, just a couple days ago. He said one of the amazing things that sets apart the Boston Tea Party from, and they never talk about this, from all this like ANTIFA stuff, all the communist revolt, revolution, like they want blood in the streets. That's how communism has to spring out, they say. You have to have that violent revolt, and that is what has to be the Kickstarter. Otherwise, it doesn't count. It won't be successful without you have to tear everything down, and then you can build up. That's their belief.
Like Kamala's line that she quotes all the time. We have to
be unburdened by what has
been.
Yes,
that's straight from the Communist
Manifesto. It sounds
Manifesto.
like it's just a word salad, but she is actually touting communist doctrine when she says that.
Hold on, say it again.
We must be unburdened by what has been.
By what has been. What has been?
The government.
We have to be unburdened.
Just our culture, our beliefs, our structure.
We gotta scrap our culture.
Yeah.
Scrap.
Yeah.
We would be in a very different America right now if she won the election.
Oh my goodness.
So
and then so she's saying that's off of some communist quoting.
That's from the Communist Manifesto.
Word for word.
not it was written in German.
Oh, okay.
But
9 has been 9. I don't know.
Aiden is very fluent in many languages. So, so he was explaining that unlike Antifa and the different Communist Party movements, when the Boston Tea Party individuals boarded the ship, it was just fresh to the harbor, and they talked to the captain. They said, "Hey, we're gonna need to take your tea and throw it overboard. We so they were basically explaining their plan to this captain. I mean, what's the captain gonna do? There's all these guys that are on a ship, and he's worried they're probably gonna kill him.
Yeah, they're armed with tomahawks and spears and stuff.
And so basically, they're having this conversation with him. He's like, "Well, at least let me get the tea off the boat, because that's how I'm gonna get paid." And they're like, "Nope, we can't do that. We are tired of what England has done to betray us. Like they have zero regard for us." And so they were talking, and the captain's like, "Well, maybe I can get paid through the insurance. So they won't fund it if you guys are the ones that did it. But if I get I think it is, if I get attacked, it wasn't just like a protest. If I get attacked and I couldn't defend myself, it was under like piracy. If pirates attack, then I can get compensation from the insurance company to pay me back for all the tea you threw overboard." Nice. So what did they do? They, were untruthful about what the incidents were. They threw the tea overboard and didn't hurt anyone. And he goes back to Britain, and who really lost out was the insurance company.
Yeah.
They had to reimburse him for all of that property. But it was just fascinating to kind of see the difference. It wasn't just this like angry revolt. It was a methodically planned out, strategically targeted. We're only targeting the tea. This is a deadly serious message to the king. We will not have any of this. No taxation without representation.
And a lot of those ideas made it into the Declaration of Independence with the list of grievances. Did you know there was an abolitionist clause originally in the Declaration of Independence?
I'm so glad you bring this up.
Yes.
Go into
this.
this.
So good.
I
will read it.
Yeah.
168 words.
This is the history they don't tell you in school. It's so tragic.
Thomas Jefferson.
Remember, slave owner, so he's racist. We have to have that context.
Racist.
Now we'll hear this.
So at this point, some context. In 1775, Lord Dunmore, who's a British guy, he offered freedom to any slave who defected to the British and fought in their army.
Really?
Yes. So this abolitionist clause is broken up into two separate things. One is condemning slavery, and the next is condemning King George for letting Dunmore do this. So, at this point, slavery was a little bit on the decline.
Really?
The founders didn't see it lasting more than 50 years after the war.
Yeah.
After the country had been founded,
which they put in the Constitution.
Yes. So they're like, okay, this is on the decline. We're not going to need this much longer. Little did they know.
Yeah.
Like even Thomas Jefferson, he was the president who stopped the selling of. He's prevented the East India Trade Company from bringing more slaves to America in 1807.
Oh, really?
So in 1807, when he's president, no more slaves are coming into America. It's just the slave trade inside America, and they are allowed to populate, and more slaves become, and that's where the Civil War really started to develop. So this is the first part of the abolitionist clause. So this is talking about grievances of King George against the American people. So he says, he has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation thither. So basically, East India Trade Company bringing slaves over. Fun fact, one of the first like legal slave owner in America, he was black, his name was Anthony Johnson. He was like at this point, slaves were captured in Africa by other Africans, sold to Portugal, brought to the United States as indentured servants, which is you work for a certain amount of time, work off your debt, and then you're a free guy.
Typically 7 years.
Anthony Johnson, who was a black man, who was a slave himself, who earned his freedom through indentured servitude, then turned around, owned slaves, and then when one of his indentured servants, who was a black man, was being like, okay, my sentence is up, like I can go and be a free man, Anthony Johnson's like, no, I own you for life. Took it to court, and the court ruled in Anthony Johnson's favor.
Wow.
Anyways,
Wait,
they
Anthony
don't
Johnson
teach
was
you
black?
that. He was the first court-cased, legal, slain over
And he was
slave
black.
owner in America, and he was a black.
That's
black.
insane. I didn't know about that.
I didn't
They
know
don't
that
teach
could
you
happen.
that. So, anyways,
That's interesting. Crazy how I'm just
Yeah.
now learning about that.
It used to be 7 years you would work, and then
it would be 7 years. It was in most points of indentured servitude. If you were like white, it was like 18, but a long time. So that's the first part of that clause where he's talking about, he's like, we don't like slaves coming in to America. So this is the second part, which is referencing Lord Dunmore, where he says, he is now exciting those very people to rise in arms among us and to purchase that liberty of which he has deprived them by murdering the people of whom he has obtruded them, thus paying off former crimes committed against the liberties of one people with crimes which he urges them to commit against the lives of another. The Declaration of Independence happened, Second Continental Congress, 1776, when they meet to vote on what goes into the Declaration. It has to be unanimous on what goes in. 2 states' representatives voted against that clause. Take a random guess.
I already know the answer, but
I think you've told me, but if I had to guess, of the 13 colonies, New York. Oh, I'm thinking modern day. I don't know. Tell me.
Georgia and South Carolina.
Oh, because they wanted slaves.
Where did the Civil War start? Fort Sumter, South Carolina.
yeah.
So those are the 2 states that voted against the abolitionist clause, and it was taken out.
Well, not only that, there's a version that it must have preceded that one, where Thomas Jefferson, because he was the penman of the Declaration of Independence
With John Jay and Ben Franklin, but he did the majority of it.
right, and so, but one of the things he says, he calls out King George?
King George III, yes.
He calls out King George III, and he says a supposedly Christian king that he bolds and underlines is engaging in the sale and trade of man. And he emphasizes man. Remember, a lot of people didn't think they were,
People.
the same as white people. Like, they thought they were incapable of functioning at the same time. Like, this was an actual thing they were discussing at that time, was whether the black man was capable of self-governance.
Well, they're people now, so.
Well, they've always been people. But
So
yeah.
that's an army joke.
So that's the tough thing about that, is that's the difference between, they had a completely different worldview back then, and they still understood that slavery was wrong. We don't hold that worldview anymore, and a good thing. We are all equal. We're all capable of self-governance. But like, we have to understand what went into our founding. We can't just talk about it and touch on the points we like, whether it's the pro or the con. We have to understand that this is our history, and we need to accept the victories, and we need to admit the defeats and say we need to change that, or we've already changed
Absolutely,
it.
yeah.
That's the glorious thing. I love that we live in a country where, Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream, honestly, we've achieved it.
What about George Washington's dream?
What was his dream?
I talked about it a little bit.
Oh, that's right. That's one of his other stories.
Yes. So, how much time do we have?
We're gonna go and make this an extended episode.
Okay, cool. Because
Nice.
this is going to take a second.
I hope it's interesting for everybody.
So-
Real quick too, just to give some context, one of the things he mentioned was like the slaves dying on their transit from Africa to Portugal
Oh
to
my
Britain to
gosh.
America. Just so you know,
Happens
those
so
slave
much.
ships were so grotesque that they were walking around in their own feces. So it's not good.
Oh my gosh!
That-
Like, people, they
No,
put
okay.
nets.
Okay.
They put nets around the ship, so in case slaves jumped overboard, the nets would catch them.
That's insane. They were slaves before they were slaves.
That's how bad the conditions on the ship were. They would rather jump overboard because black people can't swim. So I kid. That's a joke. They couldn't swim because they live in Africa. they never really learned how to swim, and people would drown in just a few minutes if they jumped overboard, and they didn't want to go and drag a dead body back in, so they just put nets around just to prevent them from escaping.
What a horrible,
That's
horrible
insane.
thing.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing is, they said they could smell them miles away. Like a slave ship pulls into your harbor, and you
know it.
because
Just
of
all
the
the-
stench, because of the feces
And the dead
and
people
probably
and the
dead people. So it was a horrible, horrible environment. Absolutely grotesque.
Oh, yeah.
And
That's so
the
sad.
Mayflower, the people that were in the Mayflower when
Experienced similar conditions.
Right. They experienced that, but then also when they landed, there was a slave ship that had passed by them, was trying to dock, and they also smelled it, and they knew it was a slave ship. It docked, and they said, "You can't keep these slaves." So a similar thing to the Tea Party. They basically let the slaves go, and they were like, "You pulled them to the wrong harbor. We're letting these people go." Again, Christianity has been a huge motivator and guide for eliminating slavery, and sadly, we haven't eliminated slavery from the world.
Sorry, continue.
Just between like human trafficking and then also other countries.
Do you know who had the longest unbroken chain of history in the entire world? What country?
Of slavery. You'll never guess.
I won't ever guess. Who had slavery for the longest unbroken time?
1,500 years.
1,500 years.
Take a random guess.
A random guess. Rome. That's a good guess, though.
Rome wasn't around for 1,500
You should have guessed Egypt. It's not Egypt.
Egypt.
but-
Okay.
Korea.
Korea. Who did they enslave?
Probably.
Other Koreans.
Other
Yeah.
Koreans? I was going to say, because I'm actually not going to say that.
Other Koreans, probably a few Chinese, depends on how powerful
So
they were.
this
but
is the other thing I
slavery-
want to just touch on before we get into the story you're going to start on, is slavery has existed. I'm absolutely opposed to it. In case anyone wanted to debate that in the comments, I'm absolutely opposed to slavery. It was an ugly, horrible, unchristian, ungodly practice, and it's unethical. So, but basically, slavery was not always a race-based process.
Oh, yeah.
And in fact, it might even be the case that it was rarely race-based. There were such things as, people enslaving the Irish because they were Irish. But like you said, the blacks that got enslaved were enslaved by blacks that had conquered them in battle.
Yep.
Same thing for Egyptians. You go through most of civilization, and you see the slaves came from war. So you would basically capture these people as prisoners of war, and then you would use them to build up your people and your infrastructure. That's how slavery worked. It had nothing to do with race. So a lot of times, slaves are the nearest neighbors of the people that were enslaving them. That's just what we see.
Right.
Usually. So this is the exception. The
Okay.
East India Trade Company was the exception.
Yeah,
Before we move on real quick, I was going to say something. You mentioned something about how Christianity has kind of been at the root of all this,
absolutely.
making things better, obviously.
Because man was made in the image of God. That's
Yeah.
the core doctrine.
Yeah, so I'd like to, this is going to make it for a good reel. I'd like to challenge anyone listening, find something wrong with Christianity. Don't say, oh, they don't let gay people get married. That's
The Crusades.
Crusades, man.
find something within Christ's teachings. Find something within Christ's teachings that is going to put a hindrance on our progression as humankind. I can't think of a single thing. Go and read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and tell me something that's wrong with that.
Well, they'll tell you that the Bible encourages slavery. And it's like, no.
Where?
Do you know the story of David and Daniel and
Yeah.
like all that kind of stuff? No, they're vehemently.
Well, just because they
And-
had laws about how to be a good slave owner does not mean that it's condoning slavery. The thing was, it's like, listen, there are people that are enslaving people. If you're going to do that, at least it's literally the difference between an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. The law did not say that if you take out someone's eye, you can take out theirs, or if they took out your eye, you could take out theirs. It was saying that you could, you basically could administer punishment up to and equal to what they did, but did not require you to do that. So that's
Right.
something that people don't realize. And it's the same thing with this. It didn't say, yeah, have slaves. It's like, treat them nice for goodness sake. That's literally the concept. And people don't talk about that enough.
Yeah,
Which
and,
is
and they'll take that. They'll put a spin on my little invitation here and say, oh, well, this and that and the other. I'm just telling you, look, read the words of Jesus Christ and find me something that's wrong with that. Read his Beatitudes. Read and tell me how that's going to
like
make America a terrible place.
so. obviously the law of Moses was revolutionary in how to treat other people, because if Jesus was revolutionary to them, the law of Moses was revolutionary to everybody else in the Fertile Crescent.
Yep.
When that happened, because beforehand they had precedents of the law of Urmamu and the law code of Hammurabi, which is basically, killed someone's slave, just pay them this amount of money and you're good in the eyes of the law, which is wild. You slept with this person's wife, pay this amount of money and you're good. So the law of Moses was revolutionary, and then Christ was even more of a revolutionist above that.
Right. So,
Insane.
And the interesting thing about that too is the reason I mentioned the Crusades is that's a perfect example of people that call themselves Christian, that their behaviors belie them. They are not Christian. If you are going out and killing and hurting other people in the name of your God,
Islam.
Not the Christian God.
Not Christian. And
Christian God doesn't direct that.
And I've been told that there are some interesting contexts that you need to understand about the Crusades. They were at war with Islam, by the way. That was the reason that all of that happened. It was the Crusades was Christians and Islam, Persians, I believe they were called back then, right?
Yeah.
And
it was Islam. So the Crusades started not very long after Muhammad was born. He was born in 507 and started Islam, and then they started taking over everything. They almost reached Europe, so Europe was being attacked from Africa by the Muslims, from north by the Vikings, and then by the Turks on the east. So they're just kind of going crazy by the Hungarians, the Huns. From the east. Wow. So they're just being attacked on all three sides, and Europe does the Holy Roman Empire does a great job of trying to stop that. The Byzantine Empire falls to Islam, and so there's just all sorts of crazy stuff happening in the Middle Ages in Europe. But
there's context to all these things. Let's try to. That's the whole purpose of this podcast. Is let's understand the context. Let's come together, see where we disagree. That's fine. We're not going to try to convince anyone to believe, other than what they believe. But we want to talk about these difficult conversations, and we want to be real.